So we have been in this section of Romans for a few weeks. This section of Romans began back in chapter 1, verse 18. And this section of Romans shows us that everyone is under the wrath of God. Everyone is under the wrath of God. Everyone is under God's judgment. Doesn't matter who you are. In chapter 3, this section will conclude by saying, all are under sin. There's none righteous. No, not one. There is none who does good. Now, the world would say that people are good. The world says that humanity is innately good, and if people do evil, it's only because of external circumstances or their environment. But people are good. But God's view of humanity is the opposite of the world's view. And God's right, by the way. God's view is that people are bad, and people are sinful, and people are rebellious, and that's why mankind needs a Savior. And that's why Jesus Christ came to the earth and dwelt on the earth as a man and died on the cross for the sins of mankind and rose again the third day. He came to salvation to sinful man. We'll see later in Romans chapter 5 that it says that Christ died for the ungodly. So Romans shows that everyone needs the gospel because everyone is under God's wrath and God's judgment. And that's what Paul, by the Spirit, is laying out for us in these first few chapters, systematically showing us that everyone is guilty. Everyone needs salvation through Jesus Christ because everyone is under the wrath of God. Back in chapter 1, we saw that the ungodly deserve God's judgment. That is, those who live without God in their life, who commit all kinds of grievous sins, they are condemned by their sin. And then in chapter 2, the first part of chapter 2, we saw that the moral person, or what we would call today the good person, is also condemned by their sin. Good people are also under God's wrath. And some people may have a hard time accepting that good people are also under the wrath and judgment of God, but they are. No one is good enough to get into heaven on their own goodness. A good person is also condemned by their sin, like the ungodly person in chapter 1. They're really no different. The good person or the moral person's sin just looks different than the ungodly person's sin. But they're just as guilty. And now in chapter 2, verse 17, we come to the Jew. It says in verse 17, indeed you are called a Jew. So Romans now addresses the Jewish person specifically, but this section applies to all religious people, not just the Jews. And so for our purposes, we're talking about the religious person. The religious person. The religious person who is trusting in their religious identity or their religious knowledge or their religious activities and rituals to save them. You know, there are many people who are trusting in some religious identity they have or religious knowledge or ritual or practice to save them. They believe they will escape God's judgment because they are religious. I'm a religious person. I'm a religious guy. I'm a devout person. Or today you hear sometimes, I'm a spiritual person. Sometimes you talk to somebody that's a religious person. They're not a born-again Christian. They're not a true born-again believer in Jesus Christ. They're not saved through Christ. They're trusting in their religion. Sometimes you talk to a person, why should you go to heaven? Why should God let you in? Well, I'm a religious person. Or sometimes you might hear them say, well, I'm a member of such and such church. Or I'm a member of such and such denomination. Or I'm an elder in my church. Or I serve on the vestry at my church. Or I was baptized. Or I was confirmed in the church. Or I went forward at a church service or at a summer camp. Or I read the Bible every year. I go through the whole Bible once a year. And so on and so on and so on. There are many religious things that people may put their trust in to save them instead of trusting in Jesus Christ. You know, the Bible tells us that we are saved by grace through faith in Jesus Christ, through faith in his death and resurrection. Jesus Christ is the only one who can save us. We're not saved through some religious identity that we may have, or through any kind of religious knowledge we may have, or religious activities or rituals that we do or keep. We're saved by Jesus Christ. And so now in verse 17, Paul addresses the religious person. Again, he's already addressed the ungodly person who's just living their life without God. They're condemned. He addressed the moral person or the good person. They're condemned. And now he addresses the religious person who believes because of their religious devotion and their religious knowledge that they will go to heaven and they will escape God's judgment. Look at verse 17. It says, "Indeed, you are called a Jew." Now, the name Jew is short for Judah. Judah is one of the 12 tribes of Israel. The name Jew became the common name for all the descendants of Israel. No matter what tribe they descended from, all Israelites are known as Jews. In the time of Jesus, all Israelites were known as Jews. Jesus was called the King of the Jews. And so the name Jew, it comes from Judah, and the name Jew or Judah, it means praise. Praise. And that will be important later on in our passage. So just kind of file that away for now. We'll come back to that.